Hey, good morning, everyone. How you guys going? First of all, thank you so much to Creative Mornings, and thank you for Hillary for that introduction. I really am honored to get this platform today. This is a really cool opportunity for me to network with a lot of you guys, and it's also cool to be able to share my experiences. So yeah, as Hillary was saying, I am based out here in Rockhampton at the moment. I'm a news camera operator and editor. So for the last 5 years or so, I've been a freelance filmmaker in every sense of the word. I feel like I've had a pretty unique experience. So last year I was working on a kids show for Channel 9 back in Brisbane. And in the years before that, I was working a lot as a freelancer in advertising, in commercial photography, videography, all that kind of stuff, and and music videos and all different kinds of stuff. So I've very much had a unique experience in that sense, and I'm very much honored today that I get to talk about the concept or the idea of stress, especially coming from people who are working in a creative sector or who are creatively inclined. I feel like it's something that we don't really talk about enough. So we'll get into that, but to give you guys a bit of a background on myself. So I was raised in Brisbane. I'm actually from an Indian family. So me and my family, we're from a place in India called Kerala. And so we moved here when I was 4 years old. I've grown up, done all my schooling in Brisbane, Australia. And, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can imagine, being a filmmaker and going into the creative industries wasn't exactly the ideal career path that my parents were hoping for me. But, for me personally, it was always something that from high school, it stuck out. I knew from very early on that this is incredible. This is something that I want to do. And, so as soon as school finished, I went straight to university. So I went and studied at QUT, did a bachelor's degree in film and television. And I ended up just doing a bunch of internships, working on a few different projects, and slowly, built a network through that, and, started getting work outside of uni. And, it's really incredible that that's the topic for this month and that I get to talk about this, because I feel like from my own personal experience, managing stress has been one of the key factors in me actually not only pursuing this dream of film and TV, but also staying with it. It's something I've had to learn very much so. It's something that has been a struggle for me for a long, long time. And I think for a lot of creative people it is. And I know for me personally, one of the major factors is that I came from a culture where predominantly, the best thing that you can do is be of service to other people. And inherently, by putting yourself out there and saying that you're a creative person and that you want to create work and that you want to very much live a lifestyle that's very unorthodox, that in itself is inherently considered it's a self-centered idea, especially from a cultural standpoint. And so I think for me, it was always a bit of a struggle finding that balance between, respecting the culture that I come from, trying to make my parents happy but also trying to fulfill what I need to do and what I want to do, quite frankly. So, for me, it's been an interesting journey in the sense that, for many years, I would feel really stressed out about the work that I was doing, or, because the film and TV industries, it's a moving target. There's no clear pathway as such as to what you can do. You do this, and this. You go to university and you'll be able to achieve this, or if you do this, that you'll suddenly be in America working on a big Hollywood feature film or something. Everyone's experience is so unique, and no one really has the same pathway of achieving any level of success or any kind of work or anything like that. So especially coming from an immigrant household, that was a very, very difficult concept to explain, especially to my parents and extended family. And so I found that stress for me came in many forms. There's the stress of being at home and trying to explain this abstract concept to my family, but also I think it came from, the pressure that I put on myself to to create incredible things, you know. And as Hillary was saying before, one of my greatest aspirations in life is to be able to create work that deeply impacts people around me. You know, for me, that's one of the greatest things that you can achieve by pursuing something in the creative sector. So I always put a lot of pressure on myself to try and, you know, be better. And that mixed in with coming from a culture where you're constantly compared to other people, and, you know, any kind of work that you do isn't good enough until you get a better result in your next exam or your next assignment or whatever it is. It's just a recipe for disaster, unfortunately. So for me, you know, today I really want to talk about, in terms of managing stress, the idea of self-compassion, you know, and Tantea talked about it briefly before. And, you know, that's something I really want to expand on, because it's a concept that for me has been the game changer. You know, it's been something that's really made the difference, especially over the last couple of years. You know, I think from my own personal experience, it's always been very, very difficult trying to be kind to myself. You know, it's actually, especially coming into a creative world where, you know, everyone's super competitive and it's hype. You got to be hypercritical and you want to try and put out the best work that you possibly can. You know, that was always a bit of a struggle, trying to find that balance between, you know, being able to produce good work, but also being able to just sit back and say, oh, hey, I actually did a great job, you know. And I think, especially coming from a cultural background where everything that you do is just highly scrutinized, and, you know, any kind of work that you do isn't good enough. It's very difficult. That's a very difficult mold to break out of, you know, especially when it starts reflecting on how you look at your own work and how you look at your own self-worth, you know. And I know for me personally, that caused issues for many, many years, you know. And I'll give you guys the example of, even when I was working at the kids show back in Brisbane, you know, and I'm sure a couple of you guys can relate, I've always suffered from the idea of just imposter syndrome. You know, I have a distinct memory of being at the Nine Studios back in Brisbane, working on this kids show. It was an incredible opportunity. It's something that's very unique, you know. Even amongst like my colleagues in the film and TV industries, there weren't a lot of people that were working on a show like that. So it was a very cool opportunity for me. But for me, I just remember feeling like, man, what am I doing here? You know, and it really is a very illogical thing to think at the time, because at that time I had already been freelancing for maybe like 4 years or something. You know, I've got that experience. It's not like I was fresh faced and I had no idea. Like, I'd been working in the film and TV industries for a while at that point, but I still have vivid memories of being at the studio and just feeling awful, you know, and feeling like, oh man, I feel like a fraud, or I feel like I don't actually belong here. And, you know, I ended up being in a very vicious cycle where that level of anxiety and that level of stress, it actually started constricting my own creativity. It started stifling my own creative voice. And, you know, for me, being in the film and TV industries, being able to create something, that to me is the ultimate freedom. And that's what it's always been about for me. You know, that's what fueled my passions as a teenager and made me want to seriously pursue a career in this, is the idea that I'm able to create a piece of work, you know, make a living off of it, but also inspire the people around me. That's very much just an incredible experience. And I'm highly inspired by people who are able to do that. You know, as Hillary mentioned in that little bio for me, I'm deeply inspired by people like Quentin Tarantino and, you know, Kendrick Lamar, these people who, again, they've lived completely different lives to me. I come from Brisbane, you know, they've obviously raised in America, but at the same time, being a young boy from Brisbane, being able to see that work and feel that inspiration, and you know, you can see it in their work, you can see their passion. That is incredible. And, you know, but at the same time, for me, I was in this position where I was actually creating work, you know, and especially in Australia, there just really isn't that much kids TV being made anymore, you know, and it was something I'd never done before. But at the same time, I just remember feeling like, oh my God, like I don't actually belong here, you know, and which is a very ridiculous. And I felt that way for a long, long time, you know, and And it wasn't even necessarily that anyone at work was making me feel like my work was subpar. No one explicitly said anything. It was all very much an internal battle. And, you know, for me, I realized that that's very much been, that's just something I've dealt with. And, you know, so for me, things really started to change when I started learning the concepts of self-compassion, you know, and specifically it was through one of my best friends, a guy called Chris. He shared a TED talk by Dr. Kristen Neff, you know, and she got up there and talked about being self-compassionate. And, you know, to be completely truthful with you guys, at the time I thought, okay, yeah, this is a cool video. This is a cool concept, but it didn't really resonate with me as much as it does now, you know, and I think that's the interesting thing, where as much as it is understanding these concepts, there's also a level of allowing time to pass, you know, and allowing yourself to experience things, and also just being ready to take in the lessons that are coming to you, you know. And so for me at that time, okay, this idea of self-compassion, all right, being nice to yourself, all right, that's cool, whatever. Didn't think much of it. It wasn't until maybe like six or 8 months later that it really just hit into my brain, you know, when obviously we've all now this year we've gone through this pandemic, you know, and even for me, that kids show, just because of, you know, how, because of politics within the network, our show actually ended up just not being renewed. And suddenly I was in a position where I was just out of work. Now, this is not something new to me. As a freelancer, you often live in this world of what we call feast or famine. You know, you work extensively for maybe like 3 or 4 months. Everything's great. You're making money. You're doing cool things. And then suddenly you'll have maybe like a 6-week period where just nothing comes in, you know. And so for me, like, this is just normal at this point, you know. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But at the same time, I suddenly found myself in a position where I had to reflect, you know. I had to sit there and think about, okay, well, I've just had this experience, you know, working for this network show, working in broadcast, which I'd never really done before up until that point. So that's when those lessons from Dr. Kristen Neff came back to me, you know. And especially for you guys, I definitely recommend you watch the TED Talk and watch a couple more of her videos. But something specific that she said to me, that she said on the video that really stuck out to me, is this idea, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the idea that sometimes the way we treat ourselves, we would never treat our best mates if they came to us with the same problems. And, you know, that idea really, really just hit home for me. You know, I feel like for me, the way I was dealing with my own stress was incredibly unhealthy at times. You know, it was incredibly negative. It was incredibly self-destructive. And obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. But the crux of it is that it was still just destructive behavior that wasn't actually helping me. You know, as much as I was used to getting that kind of reinforcement growing up, you know, it took me many, many years to realize that actually didn't help me. As much as it's helped me up until this point, it just wasn't going to work anymore. You know, it was just not conducive. It wasn't productive. It wasn't making me feel any better, you know. And as much as I wanted to be hard on myself, if anything, it was driving me deeper into a pit, and it wasn't actually getting me anywhere. And suddenly there's this radical concept of, hey, how about you just take a break? How about you just be nice to yourself? You know, how about you sit back and really, you know, think about the things that you've achieved up until this point, and think about what's next, you know. And I guess for you guys, it's important that I should say that obviously these kinds of thoughts and the ability to do this doesn't just come naturally. You know, for me, I've been incredibly fortunate that I've had an incredible support system around me for many years now, you know. And that support system has come in the form of my closest friends. You know, it's come from going to therapy. It's come from really having people around me that's encouraged that self-growth and that development. And, you know, for me, I don't think I would have come this far, and I don't think I would have come to these realizations purely just by myself. And I don't think that's how it works, quite frankly. You know, I feel like we influence the people around us, but then we also have people who influence us. And so it was very much vital that I had that kind of influencing force around me, you know, people who were there to just support me and to really allow me to come to terms with life and come to terms with the things that I was dealing with. And that's very much when those lessons from Chris and Neff became, it became relevant to me. It actually started making an impact, and suddenly I was able to just look at myself and just go, man, you've been acting like a bit of an asshole to yourself. Like, you've been incredibly mean. And I thought about the way I would like talk to myself, in my own psyche, in my own head. And, geez, if I was talking to my mates like that, like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be mates with that guy either. So for me, it was really about changing that mentality, and really being able to sit down, think about, especially in the creative sector, just because, success within that field, it can be an abstract concept at times. What's successful to one person may not be considered successful to the next, right? And I think I was trying to live off metrics that were more applicable to traditional work lifestyles, and unfortunately I come from a culture where that is just the norm. You are constantly going to be compared. It doesn't stop from just when you're a kid. It continues even when you're an adult, and especially for my parents, as much as they're supportive and as much as they're loving people, they are also products of their environment. They're also products of, a community that's brought up on this, and unfortunately they were adding a lot of added pressure in terms of, really getting in my ear about, oh, hey, look at your mates who you grew up with. They're doing this, this person's buying a house, this person's getting married, this person's doing X, Y, and Z. And all of that kind of stuff really got into my head. So, self-compassion really is what allowed me to take a step back from all of that, to take a step back and go, actually, hold on. I don't really need to compare myself to anyone else around me. I am having a unique experience. I'm living life according to my own wishes, and I'm actually in a very privileged position where, I'm now working in an industry. I'm actively working in an industry that is exactly where I want to be. I'm getting to do things that I love, and that within itself is incredible. And I think for many years I wasn't able to see that. And I think also for many years I wasn't able to acknowledge that impact of that, and even, for example, something like this, even when I said yes to doing this talk, it didn't really feel like as big of a milestone as it actually is. And it wasn't until, I shared a photo and, sort of invited some mates to come along to the talk, that I actually had that response. I had people come out to me and really, commend me and, really be excited for me. And, that's an incredible feeling, And so I think, look, for me, stress it's a part of life, and especially being in the creative sector, it's going to be constant. This really is just uncharted waters. We're all just figuring this out, and I think that's always been just such a big, it's a journey that I'm going to be continuing for the rest of my life, really. It never stops, and that's okay. And, and the other part of it that I really wanted to touch on, especially because, even stuff like this, even like this kind of talk does obviously stress me out. There's always a level of anxiety that I feel where, like I said, back when I was working on the kids show, there were moments where I felt like a fraud. And even within this, there is a part of me, there was a part of me that, truly did feel like, oh man, what do I really have to say on this topic? Is anything I'm going to say be relevant? And, I think that's normal. I feel like that's super normal to feel that kind of doubt. And as someone pointed out to me, that it's something that it shows that you actually care about what you're doing. If you feel like that, it actually shows that, okay, this is actually important to you, that, you're saying something of value. And, to me, especially in the grand scheme of the creative sector and in the grand scheme of the creative world, I feel like we're so normalized and we're so used to this idea of the tortured artist. That's something you look back on English class, you look back on any kind of art class, it's such a common trope. And for me, it's now become, and I was also someone who fell for that ploy. I was also someone who felt like, oh, well, that's just what it means to be an artist, right? Is that it means that life's tough and you take influence from that and you create incredible work and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really someone who's going to I want to be a proponent that says that, it shouldn't be that way. I feel like that shouldn't be the normal thing, that we're all just tortured people, trying to make the best out of it. I feel like I want to change that narrative and become someone who's just a lot more emotionally secure, and, someone who has healthier habits of managing stress, and someone who can also use that to create, because as I was saying before, I was often someone who fell into that cycle and fell into that dangerous trap of, you you think you can't come up without any ideas. You feel anxious about not coming up with any ideas. Then that anxiety itself stifles any kind of creativity that you can do, and then you go in circles, and it doesn't get you anywhere. And so I think for me, being in a much more healthy mindset, if anything, that influences my creativity even more. It puts me in a much better spot to it puts me in a much better spot to be able to do good work and create, and work well under pressure, and work under the stress that I'm given. And even with this opportunity now, working in news out in the regions, it's something completely different to anything I've ever done before. And to be in this place to have this really cool opportunity to learn constantly, and to have people who are supportive, and to have people who can help me become better at my craft. I feel like that ultimately puts me into a better spot, and I guess to really close back, and get to the point of all of this, in terms for you guys, the practical steps on managing stress, for me, it's really is, it's unique to everyone, right? We all have different ways of dealing with stress. That the beautiful music at the start of this meeting, that's a great way, just sitting back and listening. But I think for the most part, it's just about allowing yourself that time, allowing yourself to be okay with, hey, you know what, today I just don't feel creative. I feel like I'm just not feeling it. And you know what, because of that, I'm just going to go sit out for like an hour. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to go listen to some music. I'm just going to go for a walk. Whatever it is, man. It's, just breaking that mold, because I've been there. I've been that person just sitting at a desk, furiously trying to force myself to create something. And unfortunately, that just isn't, it just isn't the healthiest way of doing anything, really. And if anything, it puts you deeper into the pit. And that, so that's, if there's one thing that I can really give to you guys is that, it's find whatever it is, find your healthy place, man. It's, I think that's something, and, and something I should really emphasize is that it's something that we all deserve. You do deserve to have that happy place. You do deserve to be in a space where you can be confident within your skills. You can do incredible things. And if anything, it puts you in a better place tomorrow. And that's what it should all ever be, in terms of competition, you really should only be competing with yourself. As long as you're getting better tomorrow than what you were doing today, that's all that really matters, So look, that's pretty much the extent of what I've had to say. Thank you again for having me, guys.